You were looking at live pictures, Chicago O'Hare Airport, where people are protesting President Trump's travel ban, and a statement just in from Bob Corker. He is the chairman, the Republican chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, and he is saying that the administration should basically change this order immediately. Here's what he said. Quote, we all share a desire to protect the American people, but this executive order has been poorly implemented, especially with respect to green card holders. The administration should immediately make appropriate revisions, and it is my hope that following a thorough review and implementation of security enhancements, that many of these programs will be improved and reinstated. So some opposition, some criticism there coming from Bob Corker, the chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. Significant as well, because this is someone who is actually considered to be Donald Trump's Secretary of State. So we have a lot to discuss now with this and with other issues involving this travel ban. We have our panel with us now. Mark Krikorian is the executive director of the Center for Immigration Studies. We also have Alice Stewart. She is a CNN political commentator and a Republican strategist. And also with me is CNN political commentator Maria Cardona, who is also a Democratic strategist. Thank you so much to all of you for joining me. And I want to ask you first, Alice, because of this statement coming from Bob Corker, what does this say about the way this was rolled out if you have someone like Bob Corker saying this needs to be changed immediately, and there are a lot of people being caught up in this who should not be?
It says that they probably do need to make revisions. Clearly, from the very get-go, the idea behind the executive order was clear. We all knew this was going to happen. He campaigned on securing the border. He campaigned on making America safe, and we knew this was going to happen. The intent was to make America safe and prevent those from coming from areas that were terror-prone to come into this country to commit acts of terror. However, the execution of this order has not gone smoothly to anyone's stretch of the imagination, and they do need to make revisions. What we're seeing in these pictures across the nation is not good, and it's not safe. Our airports are vulnerable to violence anyway, and to have this added is not good. So I do think sooner rather than later, some revisions and pullbacks on this executive order need to be made for many reasons, not the least of which to calm the fears of those who are out traveling and those who are out protesting.
And Mark, we have seen a number of interventions by judges across the country dealing with this. I want to talk to you about the legality of this. It's an executive order banning travel from 7 Muslim majority countries. Is it legal?
The answer is yes, of course it is. But the first thing to note is that there's a whole lot of people who really need to switch to decaf. This is a 90-day pause. It's not a ban, it's a temporary pause. Likewise with the refugee issue, a 120-day pause in the resettlement of refugees. Of course, there's no question that it's legal. The president has plenary authority to keep out, and this is the words of the law, any person or any class of persons. So there's no question it's legal. Now the only issue is people who are in transit, but there's only literally something like 25 people left that are were in transit and haven't already been entered into the United States. That's an irrelevant issue.
You also may have green card holders who have left the country and are in other countries, and perhaps they aren't in between point A and B, but they are certainly stuck in other countries where they do not intend to be. Do you think it's effective? I mean, you're looking at these protests, you're seeing all of these Republicans, or not all of them, I would say a number of prominent Republican voices who are taking issue with what's going on, and then a lot of others who are just sitting back and not backing up the president on this. Is this an effective way to roll this out?
There's a couple ways there's a couple issues here. One is the green card holders are almost all going to be able to get back in, but there's going to be, we're going to get another look at who these people are as they come back into the United States. As to whether it was an effective...
Wait, so you're saying you think the process of them going through and getting a green card, you think that they haven't been effectively vetted and they need to be vetted again?
You mean like the San Bernardino shooter's wife? The answer is yes. That's why it's these seven.
In fairness, she would not have been caught up in this net, and you know that. She was coming through a country that was not one of these seven.
That's why this is a very limited, actually extremely limited, narrow measure that only applies to 7 countries of concern as are defined in the law which Congress passed and President Obama signed. And the idea that we shouldn't have further enhanced scrutiny of people coming from Somalia or Yemen is frankly kind of nuts.
Well, Maria, respond to that.
So many things here to respond to. First of all, nobody is arguing that we should not take extensive measures to keep our country safe. Everybody agrees with that. Nobody is arguing that there shouldn't be extensive vetting of people coming from those 7 countries. In fact, the Obama administration did want that. That is very different from an all-out Muslim ban of Muslims coming from those countries.
There is no Muslim ban.
And the question of illegality, of course there's a question. There's not only a question as to whether it's illegal, there's a question as to whether it's constitutional. The Constitution says you cannot have a religious test. This executive order very plainly says there should be a religious test. There is a law in 1965, immigration law, that says you cannot keep people out that are from other nationalities simply because they're from that nationality. So extensive vetting is one thing, but when you ban a whole swaths of people, that is not only illegal, Brianna, it is not only unconstitutional, but it makes our country less safe. It plays into the hands of ISIS.
Alice,
Brianna,
go ahead.
let's make sure and stick with the facts here. This is not about religion at all. This is about terrorism. And there's no religious test involved in this executive order whatsoever.
It's outlined.
There is.
No,
yes.
there's not. This is about.
You should read it.
Alice, I have a question. So when you read the order,
the world's Muslims are not covered by this rule.
When you read the order and you hear the description coming from members of the Trump administration, you're saying there's no discussion of religion.
There is not a religious test involved in this executive order whatsoever.
Alice, there is.
And these seven
Rudy Giuliani said it was a
countries,
Muslim ban, and it says in the order that Christians are going to be prioritized over Muslims. If that's not a religious test, I don't know what is.
The 7 countries that were identified, as we just heard in the statement from the White House, these were identified by the Obama administration, Congress during the Obama administration. These countries were named as areas and sites of terror. That's why these countries were named, and that is important.
But Alice,
that's
only been something, Alice, and we've been seeing. No, I want to ask Alice a question about that. We have seen that that's something that wasn't even brought up initially. It seems to have been something to, I guess, to give cover to the Trump administration
from all the blowback.
When they've been criticized here, it doesn't seem to be an initial justification for this. And to that point, I mean, just what Mark was talking about, the San Bernardino shooter. So you're saying, yes, it's these 7 countries identified in a list of some sort, maybe not with this in mind, but what about Afghanistan or Pakistan or Saudi Arabia or a number of other countries?
Places where terrorists have actually come from and done harm to the United States.
Well, look, the point is that these countries were named, as I said, from the Obama administration. And the reason it's being brought to light now is because of the false accusations that this has to do with religion and not terror. And that's why it's being addressed at this point.
But then it was very poorly written. It was very poorly written because in the executive order itself, it says Christians from these nations can be prioritized and let in, but not
it does not.
Muslims.
Excuse me, Maria.
Yes, it does.
In refugee resettlement, it says that Christians religious minorities, Christians and Yazidis, can be prioritized.
Religious minorities from these countries, that is correct.
It has nothing to do with the travel ban, number one. Number two, the reason for that is that the UNHCR does not refer Christians for resettlement. 97% at least of all refugees we've taken from Syria are Muslims, even though 10 or 12% of the population are Christians, and they're the ones on the firing line. So it's a kind of
we have resettled
compensatory
almost
thing.
as many Christians as we have Muslims, Mark.
From Syria,
So
we have
don't-
not
so
settled
do
more than
not-
a handful of Christians from Syria. A
So
tiny
you know,
number.
so don't start.
Is that
spewing,
true or not?
Spewing
I mean, are
things
you-
that
are
aren't
you-
correct?
are you-
You're
no,
misguiding
excuse me.
the viewers. And so when it comes to
97% of the refugees from Syria have
when
been
it comes
Muslims.
to actions that are effective, this is not an action that is effective in keeping us safe.
And
When you
that's
have
now you're
ISIS,
changing the subject.
When
Now
you
you're
have
changing the
ISIS,
subject.
When you have ISIS that is gleefully tweeting about this news about the Muslim ban, President Trump is playing into the whole story that ISIS wants the world to believe, that it is ISIS and the Islamic world against the United States. And we have absolutely played into that, and that
Look,
makes us
Maria,
less
with-
safe.
And Alice,
with-
Mark, and Maria, I am going to have to leave our conversation there. I know we have so much more to discuss, and we will at a future time, I promise.